Yeah, we handed them out months ago. No, because we only had one for each board member.
No, that's fine, as long as they, okay.
There you go. All right. Thank you. Mrs. Tioni, thank you. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Tioni. Mr. Azar, hello. Tioni? Hello?
Yeah, you want to make sure
Those were the two.
Oh, they were the two?
Grace is coming, right? No. I was just describing.
Treasurer sent it to. I don't even know what that means.
Around here, but like out there, there's a lot of times where they'll bring it pop out.
I don't know what that word means. And that wasn't in Urban Dictionary.
Thank you.
Let's start with Urban Dictionary.
So things are good. Hey, how are you? Yeah.
Okay. It needs a little bit of help. Just an impression.
Some of the stuff is really interesting. I like my daughter. Has a rising elementary.
Good stuff.
Okay. Bridget, we're gonna start. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance roll call, and then we'll kick it off to you. Is it in your? Is it in your folder?
We're talking curriculum thing?
Oh, gotcha.
Are you ready?
Yep, we're ready.
Okay. Welcome to the Abington Heights School Board meeting for February 7th. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mrs. O'Day, can you please do roll call?
Mr. Abdallah,
Here.
Mr. Azar,
Here.
Mrs. Henderson,
Here.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Here.
Mrs. Karam, Mr. Moran,
Here.
Mr. Robeson,
Here.
Mrs. Tierney,
Here.
Mr. Acker,
Here.
8 present.
Okay. The next order of business would be to approve the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, can I interrupt the meeting for 1 second, please? PSBA sent me a brochure and asked me to read this to the board tonight at a public meeting before our meeting. Mr. Acker, it's very positive. As the secretary of the Abington Heights Board,
Go right ahead.
PSBA actually is doing a new initiative this year to congratulate newly elected members of the school board. Enclosed here that I have are certificates for our 2 new members, and Pennsylvania School Board is so thrilled that they have taken this step into the service of Abington Heights and for the state. They automatically receive benefits upon election through the district's membership. And they've asked me to distribute these 2 certificates to both Grace Hildebrand and Greg Moran.
Okay, I understand we have some student participants. We'd love to have them come up. Mrs. Frankfelter, can you help us out here?
To celebrate our students' extracurricular activities that we have at each elementary school. So we have 2 elementary musicians here. We're doing something a little bit different tonight. So Luca, I think, is going to go first. Luca Healy is a 2nd grade student at Newton Ransom, and he plays the accordion. So he's going to do 2 songs for us. And then Cooper King is in 3rd grade, and he does the guitar. So we hope you're entertained. And we don't want to we don't have traditional clubs at the elementary level, so we wanted to highlight some of the things that they do on their own and they are passionate about. So we hope you enjoy it.
And parents, if you want to come behind here and take pictures, you're more than welcome.
Absolutely.
Just know you'll be on YouTube.
Right, you will be on
That's your,
YouTube.
that's your, that's your.
It's my charging.
Mr. Acker, that was a band called Green Day.
Oh, it was.
Can you,
Absolutely.
can we make, wait, can we make a request for AC/DC? I'm a giant AC/DC fan, and you're wearing the strap.
Closer, you're getting
Go for it. That's why I'm asking. I would love to hear it, buddy. Do you know any of them? Go for it.
Let's play half of it.
Okay. Thank you for coming out.
That was great.
Impressive. He said he's playing 6 years in kindergarten. I said he gets all the time because we have half-day program. You're welcome.
Do we want to give, do we want to give, have Bridget give the, I gave her,
Guys, thank you very much. That was great.
no, I gave Bridget.
Okay, we're good.
So, Mr. Lamb and Mr. McVetti, if you'd like to bring your instruments in and play for us instead of the student report, by all means. Go. No, oh, no, it's a team effort. It's got to be, it's both of you or none, you know, it's the way.
You can sing.
Okay. I'd like to have an approval for the minutes of the meeting of November 15th, December 6th, and January 3rd. On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Okay, are there any board reports at this time from committee meetings or? Hildebrand is missing. Nope. Want to talk about curriculum at all?
I was gonna prepare it and report next
So,
time.
Next meeting.
Yes.
You'll wow us then.
March,
With an
Great
accordion,
stuff.
I hope.
March
Maybe.
20th.
March 20th.
All right. In that particular case, we're on to Mr. Lamb and Mr. McVetti. The floor is yours.
Well, my report won't be as exciting as what that just was, but
How do you even follow that, right?
you know how I'm going to follow it? I'm going to follow it with the athletics report. That's what I'm gonna do. And so the winter sports teams, well, they've certainly had a great success across the board so far. I'll start off with the swimming and diving team. The boys are currently second in the league with a 7-1 record overall. The girls are fourth in the league with a 5-3 record. Our divers have been excelling at competitions throughout the past few months, and individual records have been set by Ethan Hortz. They include a new Tunkhannock 11 dive pool record and a 6 dive pool record at Abington Heights. Now with the girls basketball, the Lady Comets are currently 14-6 overall and 7-4 in the league. The girls had an incredibly successful night at the Pink game versus North Pocono. Not only did our girls win in a dramatic fashion with a packed gym and in overtime, but both teams also came together for a great cause. Together with the North Pocono community, the AH girls basketball boosters, coaches, and players from both junior high and varsity, we raised $20,433. The amount does not include any sponsorships or donations that were sent directly to the Foundation for Cancer's Care. Let's make sure our Lady Comets have a crazy home court advantage again for their senior night matchup against Wallenpaupack on Friday, February 9th. And with wrestling, the Comet Wrestlers finished the regular season with a 13-4 overall record and 2-2 in league duels. They earned third place finish in the District 2 AAA dual meet. Congratulations to Brian Hurd, Caleb Marzolino, and Austin Smith on earning their respective 100th career victories. The team will now prepare for individual districts at Wilkes-Barre area on February 23rd and 24th. With Unified Bocce, the team is currently 4-1 on the season and second place in league standings. The regional playoffs will be hosted by Carbondale Area High School on Tuesday, February 27th at 4:30 p.m. The boys basketball remains undefeated at 20-0 and are ranked number 9 in the Pennsylvania state rankings and number 1 in their 5A classification ranking. Senior night is scheduled for Monday, February 12th versus West Scranton. Just the same as the girls, let's make sure this gym is packed so we can support our guys. Junior varsity is scheduled to start at 6 p.m. and the seniors will be honored prior to the start of the varsity game. Now with spring sports, the official start date is Monday, March 4th. Once again, through our partnership with the Lehigh Valley Health Network, we are pleased to offer free on-site physicals at the Abington Heights High School for spring sport athletes in all grades 7 to 12 on Saturday, February 17th from 9 to 11 a.m. The physicals will be held at the school nurses suite in the high school. And just a quick reminder, if athletes have already had a sports physical to play a fall or winter sport, they will only need to complete a recertification form and they will not have to require a new physical through our office. And also hot off the press, we want to congratulate the WPSD and the Comets Hybrid Esports team for sweeping their way into the Garden State Esports Overwatch 2 finals for the Valkyrie division, the all-female teams. And as of this moment, they remain unbeaten. And we want to thank you all for your continued support of our student athletes and for helping us to continue building that Comet pride. Thank you.
In a brief co-curricular news update, midterms and semester finals were held at the high school on January 24th, 25th, and 26th. Congratulations to several senior students who have won scholarships to participate in Senator Marty Flynn's ambassadorship program. Madeline Harold, William Newton, Dane Hugler, Aiden Lamb, and Hallie Morris. This year's semi-formal dance will be held on February 10th at the Scranton Cultural Center, and the theme this year is Frosted Forest. About 670 students will be enjoying a nice evening thanks to the Student Council. Report cards have been posted to the Infinite Campus student portal, and hard copies will be sent to Homewood students this week. The freshman and sophomore class students have had several presentations scheduled. The first being the Travis Mannion Foundation, giving presentations on characters related to their program, If Not Me, Then Who? And the Endless Mountain Extended Care will be visiting at the end of this month to present drug and alcohol presentations. SAD, the Students Against Destructive Decisions Club, is sponsoring a P.S. I Love You campaign, and the school will dress in purple on Friday, February 19th as a reminder to love yourself, show love to others, and bring awareness to suicide prevention. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. With that, Dr. Schaefer?
All right, thank you. So, for today's superintendent's report, I've asked Jim Marabelli to provide us with a budget presentation, and this is really meant to be less of a presentation and more of a discussion. So I would encourage everybody to ask questions, engage in discussions as we have been talking about for the last year and a half and really ramping up in these next couple months about future construction projects and facility improvements. And that is predicated upon our budget. So Jim is going to look a little back, look a little forward, and we can chat a little bit.
As soon as that comes up on the screen, I heard it, kind of.
Oh, I think it might have just shut off. The remote's right there, Jim.
So it's good to be with everyone tonight here, and this is kind of the informal kickoff to what I like to call budget season, right? But I would hope that this would be more of a dialogue, right? Because any questions and feedback you provide me informs and gives me a shot at answering them with real data at the next time I come and present, okay? So it's very important that we sort of walk through, and if there's an answer I don't have, I'll provide it to you. Okay, it's warming up.
Yeah.
So I hope this could be an open dialogue. I promised Chris I'd keep it to 5 graphs or less, so I didn't get too graphy tonight. So what I'm going to start with here is kind of just an overview. I want to provide some updates, and why the updates are important is because we're at a time where we're trying to do some things with facilities, and we're trying to look at debt service. And then we also have a budget to pass, so that's operating capital sort of colliding here. And we're going to kind of explore the intertwining of those two concepts. And I don't think this thing's going to work. So a quick overview, I have some select financial data to lead this kind of discussion through. And then I just want to give you a 22-23 update and a 2024 year-to-date update. So here's this slide, a graph that you probably was familiar to a lot of folks. I plagiarized this right from Dr. Schaefer's presentation that we put up a few times. And this is an enrollment trend, but it tells a lot of stories here, right? So we start out in 2010 with approximately 3,475 students. And you can see we had this decline in enrollment. So we had less students. And over that time, we were able to right-size the staff, right? So we would then have less staff. And so we were able to pay less staff. And that allowed us to reduce costs, right? Without necessarily raising revenues, right? Not a surprise to a lot of folks. And then we hit 2016-17, and we saw enrollment tick up. And we started saying, well, maybe it's a blip. And then we saw it the next year, and we said, not yet a trend, but I think undeniably now you can say that enrollment is on the rise, right? And we have more students, and we're back at the levels where we were in 2010. So all the staff that we were able to take off the roles and reduce through attrition, we now had to put back on, okay, to have adequate class sizes and provide the services and programs that we desire to provide. The way that we did that back in 2021 was we utilized stimulus funds. We utilized ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 to put those salaries on there. Now, as we talked about last budget cycle, we were able to absorb ESSER 2, right? And as we know now, ESSER 3 now has to be reckoned with, right? So that's about $820,000, and I'll show you in a second. We think, I'm wading into the educational space, but staffing is probably adequate, would you say, at this point? I don't hear anyone saying class sizes are too low, or anything of that nature. But I think it's important to know that we're sort of lean, and this graph tells that story. So if you look at, there's a lot going on here, but what this shows is Abington Heights average spending per student, right? That's the dark blue line at the bottom. And then you have your state average spending per student and your NEIU 19-year regional average per student spending. The first question I usually get is, well, yeah, but we have low debt service here. I eliminated debt service out so we can normalize the operating expenses here. So we're comparing apples to apples across districts. Now, if you see the note, and there's these two arrows, Abington Heights in 2022, that's the last audited year that comparable data is available. We spent $14,290 per student versus the state average of $18,964. That's a gap of $4,674 per student, which is pretty significant, right? Multiply that by 3,400 kids, and you have a pretty significant amount of revenue advantage that some of the other schools have that we don't. So if we spend only $14,000, since we operate at a break even, we only take in $14,000. Right? So the other districts on the average are taking in $18,964. Now this little note, which in the bottom right-hand corner, which isn't showing up very well, is that Abington Heights is ranked 477 out of 499 in spending per student. So undeniably low spending in all of the years here, but in 2022, that is our ranking.
You don't have data yet for 2023 for the state or the NAIU?
So AFR's annual financial reports are filed in November, and then there's a revision period. And then once everyone's audits are finalized, ours will be finalized later this month, and you'll get a presentation in March. PDE then starts processing the data, and they'll publish it in like May, June. And then, so right before the final budget, I'm usually able to come and provide you that information.
It's a one-year lag.
Yeah, it's a one-year lag. But since I have our information, I figured I would.
What's interesting to me is that the slope from 21 to 22 for obviously we raised revenues the last 2 years in a way we haven't done in a little while. We're still at a not as steep of an increase as the state average or the NEIU average. Everybody in the state is having to do the same thing because of inflation and costs.
Exactly. So the magnitude there, and that was a very significant step up from 21 to 22 for us, adding all of those positions, right? Okay. Now, every school district in the Commonwealth that I'm aware of is dealing with special education cost challenges, right? This is another undeniable trend we have here, but there's sort of a trend within a trend in this. So here we have budget and actual data from 2015 to 2023. So you can see we go from about 4.7 million to 6.7 million over that short period of time. So it's $2 more million in your expense now that you didn't have back in 2015. But the more troubling thing is you can see what we try to do, budget versus actual every year, right? So budget actual came in over budget every single year over this analysis. And you can see where we tried to budget more the next year and catch up and get ahead of it. There's only so many dollars available, right? But special ed has busted the budget every year, except for maybe 2020. It came in kind of on track, just a little bit over. But this is a challenge that all school districts are facing. These special ed costs, whether it's having to hire inside, outside placements, charter school, cyber charter school, special ed. One of the new things we're kind of seeing is cyber charters are identifying students that are there, and they're now becoming special ed, and that means we go from an $11,000 tuition rate to over $21,000 tuition rate. Same kid, perhaps different services, but we pay double just because of that movement. And I think the data showed that we looked at today, Chris, there were about 4 or 5 more month over month that went from regular ed to special ed. So that is a challenge we'll have to deal with. Charter school costs, you can look at this graph 2 ways. One way you can say there's $1.4 million coming out of our budget to send kids elsewhere that we gain nothing from. Or you can look at it and say, well, charter schools came down $500,000 since 2021. As you know, this was shape. We're working hard to bring these kids back, right? And with all the other districts I'm working with, this is a more positive trend that we're seeing, right? So, you know, this is a smaller sample size, but I'm sure if we can look at national averages. I'd love to see the 23 and 24 data though, because those are the real telling ones. All we have now is 22. We have a positive trend, but it's still a really big number. $1.4 million out of a $55 million budget is still a lot of local tax dollars going toward kids that you get to here. Yes.
Question, I was reading the proposed budget of the governor,
Yes.
and there's a recognition of trying to get charter reform in the sense of the standard $8,000 per pupil cost, so that would put more special ed funding back into the districts, or anything like that.
So
Because right now you said
If it came to fruition, based on the governor's proposal, and that's minus a ton of politics, that would be about a $300,000 net savings to us.
you would see that green bar drop to about 1.35. No, I'm sorry, 1.1.
So for instance, if we have a student that has been identified special education, Abington Heights plays, let's just say, a cyber charter, CCA, random, okay? Our cost would be $22,000. If Lower Merion School District has a student that goes online to CCA, they're paying $50,000. So there are 500 different formulas in Pennsylvania, tuitions in cyber schools. Charters hate it when we say tuitions, but it's a distinction without a difference, however they want to say it.
And they're providing the same service.
Right, so that's what they're doing. They're just saying, hey, look, let's standardize it, but this has been, 25 years in discussion, so we would realize big savings.
Yeah, that would be good. But, for now and for future growth, I mean, $8,000 it still hurts, but it's not eliminating growth.
Right, and the other thing is, Jim's talked about this before, and this perhaps was not in the proposal, but something that we constantly advocate for, is, I'll call it categorical funding for students with special needs, right? So we report students in 3 categories. Approximately 80% or more of our students, and this is a statewide figure, need the lowest level of support. So speech and language, it doesn't cost us much relative to some students with very complex needs, right? So, to Jim's point, when he talked about the discrepancy between what we receive in subsidy and what we pay, this is a great example, okay? In charters, there is no categorical funding. They get the whole shooting match. So, and these are all things that have been known, are known, what we call the P organizations in Pennsylvania, all the organizations that represent superintendents, assistant superintendents, business managers, so on and so forth. They've been all advocating the same thing. But this just goes to show the importance of these proposals and what it means in real dollars for us.
If I can interrupt, our public is sending us messages that people aren't using the microphones and they can't hear.
I'm the person, I think, right?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, Dr. Schaefer as well. I just wanted to offer that feedback.
All right,
'cause my
I'll
phone is
try to
blowing
stick
up.
here as much as possible. So one other wrinkle in this tuition calculation here. The tuition calculation is based on our own expenditures, okay? And one of the things we are allowed to deduct out of this is federal dollars that we pay for things, right? So we have a large chunk of federal dollars, 820,000, that are currently this year paying for salary and benefits. That deduction is going to go away next year. We still have the same people. The charter schools will get a raise, because of the funding mechanism of where the dollars come from. It's really, it's an unfair formula. It really is unfair. And the 11,000 that we currently pay is actually comparatively, we can run, we have data that shows that our tuition rate is pretty low. There's some local districts that have some eye-popping special ed tuition rates, $40,000, $50,000. And in the Philly Burb area, they're very, very significant rates that
I guess this is for Dr. Schaefer. Are you seeing a trend of students returning back to Abington Heights?
Yep, so as of, I mean, there's a 1 month lag. When I first came in, we were about 150 students out, and we're anywhere from 90 to 97. So we'll just continue to watch that, continue to work with families, and I told Jim today that, you know, if you were a parent, and this is just complete and utter speculation based on no evidence, besides what's in between my 2 ears, is, you know, if I sent my son or daughters to a charter and they were there during this COVID time there for 2 to 3 years, I'm not so sure I'd want them to transition back, right? So these are some of the decisions I've heard families talk about, right? So, you know, I'm now also taking a look at trends as we move away. Are we starting to see patterns, this normalization based on previous numbers? But these are all things that, you know, we'll continue to look at. I hope. I think all the evidence. Now, this is evidence. This is not complete and utter speculation, right? This is evidence. Will tell you that school districts, specifically Abington Heights, outperform every single charter every day of the week and twice on Sunday. This has been published all over, from graduation rates to state assessments, you name it. They don't pull data like we pull data. Every year I go over twice with you the National Student Clearinghouse data, which tells you where our students are 4, 5, 6 years after they graduate. Nobody has the guts to publish that and talk about that like we do. There's only a couple districts in the state that do that, and that's really important information to have. So I feel absolutely confident saying that the value of what we offer is way higher, but long-winded answer, but we continue to work
Thank
those
you.
numbers down.
And now, I want to talk about staffing. So I think it was Mrs. Henderson gets the gold star. She cited the percentage of salary and benefits in the last board meeting that we pay. But was that 75% of our budget is salary and benefits, right? So 45% in salaries, 30% in benefits, comes up to obviously 75%. Of the benefits, I provided a breakdown for just so we know what we're spending it on. Health insurances, that includes dental and vision, $5.7 million. Social Security, that's your FICA taxes, about $2 million. Half of that does get reimbursed by the state. Retirement, we pay $8.5 million, and half of that does get reimbursed by the state, but even with the reimbursement, it remains one of our largest budget line items. And then we have some other benefits, tuition reimbursement there. So of that 75%, you can see salaries are $25.3 million of our budget. And the 3 collective bargaining agreements, or I guess the 2 CBAs and the 1 Act 93 agreement that we have, all call for 3% salary increases, okay? So we'll do, when we budget salaries, we don't just put a 3% modifier on there. We go in, we find out where the teacher or the administrator is on the schedule, and we place them where they're supposed to be, not necessarily 3%, right? So when we're actually budgeting, there's more precision to it. But let's do some back-of-the-envelope math just to give you some order of magnitude as to what you can expect in the 24-25 budget proposal that you'll see in the coming months, okay? So $25.3 million times 3% is $760,000 in salary increases. When you add Social Security and retirement, that's approximately another 160 grand. You'll have about $920,000 in net additional staffing costs next year, okay? So that the budget will grow by $920,000, give or take. Again, there's some more precision to it, but it's not going to be far from that number. If you hire 2 more people, it will grow by that amount. If you don't replace a person or 2, it will shrink by that amount. But largely, that is the number that we'll be toiling with.
So would you do some, like, back of the matchbox mathematics, like I'm prone to do with Jim? The way I think about it is, like, when I take a look at that 920, right there, that's 3%, okay? Each mill is about $220,000, right? So you're a little 4, right? So you know, based on our collective bargaining agreements, that we need to generate that. That's 3%. You can only get that a couple ways. One is that we can make cuts, okay? And then reallocate that back in. But Jim showed you a graph earlier where we saw the enrollment, right? We had that time where we were making cuts based on enrollment and otherwise, right? But we're not there right now. And then the other way is to raise taxes, unless you're getting revenue from some other subsidies and things like that. But so when I take a look at that for next year, that $920K, I add another $800,000 onto that because of what Jim talked about as well, ESSER 3. Okay, so that's another 8. So you know you're 1.7 down going in. So that's the way I see it in my head. I try to make it as simple as possible that way. Sometimes maybe it's oversimplifying, but you know, I'm 1.7 in the hole. And then we had a work session where we talked about $90 million in borrowing, anywhere from $4.7 million to $5.4 million a year in debt service. So you're working to get to a surplus there. Okay? So I wanted to put it to you in those terms as we take a look at it. And what Jim started to talk about, I mean, it's not all dire, right? There is, you know, we tend to talk a lot about what some of the headwinds are, but there are some tailwinds.
Yeah, and I think you look at it, what we did with ESSER 2, right? There were some creative moves made to mitigate. ESSER 2 was worth about, I think, $560,000 or $580,000 over 2 years, and we made some staffing moves to mitigate that last year, partially at least, or maybe full. No, I think we fully mitigated that last year. So, you know, that was a step in the right direction. So now we have another math problem to solve, right? So we have ESSER 3. So it's a big rock to move, but there are a couple of tailwinds that might be on the way. So let's move on, and we'll see when we get there, right?
Jim, before we move on one second. So my simple mind trying to figure this out. How could we be at the bottom of the state for spending per pupil, but still be $2 million in the hole?
2 million.
Well, I mean, $2 million, like we have to make up $1.8 million to keep what we have.
Well, so I think what Chris is talking about is the $1.8 million challenge going into next year, right? So you lose revenue and you have this extra expense to go into. But when you look at how you're spending your 75% of your budget, right, that's largely on staff. I think the question becomes, look at your class sizes, how efficiently are you deploying your staff? And I think the answer, again, I'm the finance guy, but I think the answer is you're deploying your staff in a very efficient way, okay? I recall that there was a consultant to look at the middle school schedule. Maybe Chris can.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this, I think, over the last couple years. I speak about school schedules being financial models, and that's how you look at them. You know, you can be really efficient, you can be really inefficient, you can be in there in the middle, but ultimately you want to make sure that you are running as efficient as you can be. And we did a lot of staff optimization in the last couple years to get to a place where we felt as if this machine, the operational machine, was running as intended, meaning that, and I'm not, this isn't meant to be like a negative word, but any slack in the system was tightened. So we could in good faith come back and say, hey, we are running schedules that are very optimized, right? We are running transportation that is very optimized. You want your kids in the middle school, go a little later? Then we won't run a 3-tier bus system where we've got buses going back to one, back to another, and back to another. We'll have to find more buses and more drivers and really raise up the cost. Now, I really oversimplified that, but it's really difficult to find drivers and buses. But that's just an example of how you look at the various operational aspects of this organization. So I'm taking the academic piece, I'm putting in here, and I'm just talking about the mechanics of it.
Yes.
I don't think it's fair to just, only talk about the fact that we're efficient. We've also, as a school district for a very long time, proactively made the decision to defer maintenance. And we don't have debt service like a lot of other school districts do that have updated their facilities. The fact that we've spent as much time the last 2 years talking about the facility needs that we have, that deferred maintenance is still a liability. It's just not funded yet. So we haven't raised the revenues to pay. Had we raised the revenues in the past to generate the surplus that we still need to raise to do all the facilities work that we have to do, we would be much closer, am I correct, to the state average in terms of per pupil spending. But because we haven't invested that money into capital over time to increase our costs, that's a tailwind for why we have such a, that's a big factor in why we're much below the state average. Is that a fair statement?
I guess my answer would be that I'd have to look at the data, because here's why. Capital is excluded from that analysis, right? So transfers out, capital reserve, debt service is excluded from that analysis as far as the ranking, right? So I may, this is just, I'm speculating here, but older buildings require more maintenance. We do have data that we can compare in the state. They're called functions in the PDE account code, right? So the 2600s are the maintenance accounts. And we can pull all 499 schools' maintenance, the 2600s, and we can compare per pupil what they spend. You have to normalize for buildings, but how many buildings, right? So we can take a look at and make some, I'm not sure exactly what we would glean from that, but we can see what the spending per pupil on maintenance is, and maybe we can draw some conclusions.
So that ranking excludes debt service. I wasn't aware of that. So
Yes,
when you look at that ranking,
That's a question I get.
it's purely an operational.
Yeah.
That's why I asked.
Purely operational, yes. So you see, at the very bottom, I put excludes in capital letters there, just because that's like, it's glaringly, so we do exclude capital and debt payments from that analysis.
And I'd make the caveat, I'd look at some data, so this is anecdotal based on my own experiences. However, we've talked about this a little bit before, and that is, one could make the argument that we are a little light on staffing. So if you took a look at the categories of staff we have, the elementary, middle, and high school level, and compared them up to similar or like districts, we would most likely have some lower staffing. The same thing could be said for your central office.
Yep.
Perhaps some of the programs that, you offer, whether that be like a full day K versus a half day K, all these things drive staff numbers up, which would close that gap a little bit. But as you can see, like we have over time, over the last 12 years, we have been lagging relative to the average. But over the last 6 years, it's grown, so it's expanded. It may now be more of a leveling piece, but it definitely has expanded, right? And I'm not making any types of value judgments on that, because anyone could look at me and say, hey, Chris, but you still outperform 95% of the districts out there, right? And you know, you have to be cautious about looking at that in a vacuum. But again, it just means that we can't make quick judgment calls. You have to really analyze and think about every single decision you make relative to some of the programs and things like that. Go, yes, sorry.
That just brought up another thought on this graph.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think certainly the board can attest to the fact that we often talk about being lean. And lean, from a business standpoint, is a good thing. But I think it also means where we have less staffing and so on, it means there are things that we would like to do that become more difficult because we don't have those things. So I think as the board looks at services and things we're going to be doing, we have to keep in mind that the impact it has on the organization. And it directly relates to the cost that we have per student and in our budget.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sure, like, I'll just give you one example, and if any of you are social scientists or geek out and read any of that kind of thing, if I told Maggie that, you know, look, we're going to hire 5 more staff members, reading specialists at all levels, math interventionists, reading, she would be very excited. As would I, because I know from my time, 28 years, and very little compared to plenty of people I've spoken with, is that in my experience in many suburban districts that have similar characteristics as us, that we lean on our families to pick up the slack in many ways. And I don't mean slack as in a derogatory term at all. I mean, during COVID and when I got here, I spoke with several family members. You know, I call a hybrid day, and I'll talk to many parents that tell me that I want to be teaching algebra again. I did this for a year. Right? I don't want to be teaching biology again. I did this for a year. So we're fortunate that we have a lot of community members and parents that are able to assist and supplement. That's a better word, to supplement. And there are many districts that don't have that. And I only mention that because that can have a little bit of a masking effect, right? And I'm sharing this now because I'm not trying to make some type of point or anything like that. What I'm just trying to demonstrate as I talk about this out loud is that it's a very complex thing that we're talking about. And this is why we're having discussions like this, and we can talk about it, because staffing is very real and it will have an impact, right? We want to do more for our students. Simultaneously, we want to have the opportunity to build. And in the build, we have to get to a place of surplus capital, right? So.
It's a complicated math problem, for sure.
I also want to comment on the high bar that Abington Heights has always had. It's a high standard of hiring We have phenomenal educators here and administrators that go to a higher standard, and that's why our scores are so high. And that contributing with our community and our parents, I think we should be really proud that we have been very low at spending, but incredibly high scores. And so that is accountability, and it is just a tribute to the standard that Abington Heights has had.
Are you able to stratify this data by like specific school districts? Like, could you create a group of schools that look and smell like Abington Heights around the state and compare us to that? Because this is really, I mean,
Yeah, I absolutely can.
if it doesn't include debt service, which it doesn't, then
Well,
I'd like to know, like, what are the top 50
well,
school districts in the state?
I can tell you that, Jim, you can get this on the state website. That number here, this 14,000, I'll have to go look back. I'll forward it to you, find it. Sometimes you just bump into data on the state website. And I was able to sort it, and I wouldn't have put any of the schools around us in any type of category or any type of band that would be like.
They're not similar to Abington.
Correct. The school districts that had similar achievement patterns, things like that, that I would, and again, spot looking on it, you know, it's you know, up that way. In fact, I mean, you can make some inferences about, Jim, which one's the IU line?
I think the IU is the
Carolina
yeah,
blue?
the meter, yeah, Carolina.
Right here. That's NEIU.
I mean, because Mr. Azar, I'm always curious about this, and the one thing that I choose, and it's not random, it's similar to achievement and things like that, is New Hope, Soulberry, and that is probably what, 26,000?
Yeah.
It's around there. And so it's, you know, and we don't even see that on the chart. That's the average. So it's, you know, in school districts that are similar to our achievement, it's even more.
So I guess we can build any peer group you like, and however we define that, I'll just, there's just check box. I just check them off. Any 25, 50 you want to see, I'll come back in the next presentation and have it. That's no problem. That's what we have the software for.
The problem, to your point, Phil, is exactly when you look at suburban, what we would call suburban schools like ours, they're probably all clustered around Philadelphia or around Pittsburgh, where inherently the cost, all the costs are much higher. So even if they had the same staffing levels, that average cost per student would be higher just because so it's very hard to pull a subset that we can use from a meaningful standpoint of managing. I don't know how you do it. I mean, I think to some extent the IU may be the best because you're looking at cost of educating students.
I think it's a small group. That's a great point. Like, you can't compare us to the suburbs of
No, you
mainline
can't. You
Philly or outside of Pittsburgh, the best neighborhoods. You have to pick, like.
But to Mrs. Tierney's point, our performance is near
Oh,
or better
absolutely.
than theirs.
I think there is a subset, though. I mean, in our own NEIU, you could pick 3 or 4 schools that you'd want to compare us to.
Yes,
And then-
Dallas, you could pick Dallas, Crestwood,
Wallen Paul Pack, maybe.
Wallen Paul Pack, yeah. Right.
2 questions. Could we compare us to other schools with similar academic performance rather than rather than physical layout, right? So if I see a school that's ranked top 25 in the state, how do we spend our money
So-
different than how they spend their money?
So I remember a graph we saw a number of years ago where they had the top performing schools in the state, and they had dots. They had a state map, and they had dots. And when you looked at that, you saw a whole bunch of dots around right around Philadelphia, right around Pittsburgh, and then you saw one dot up in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but
And it's so hard to come up with.
I think if we looked and said
Comparative,
they spent 10% of their budget here, or like some kind of breakdown of where the money's spent, and see does that correlate to our trends, and is there any obvious gaps in that information?
Well,
And
Gregory, you see that 75% is in most school districts, that pie is pretty similar. So it's their area, and the salaries are going to be much higher. So that's what's
Sure.
that's what doesn't make it equal.
Sure, but if you broke that down into the number of students in that school, so you're saying at Abington Heights, I have $14,000 spent on me, and so, okay, $10,000 of that is to my educators, which is obvious. How am I spending the other $4,000 that's having an impact to have them have high performance that's equal to or better than ours? And so that's what I would be curious to know. The other question I have, is there anything besides capital expenses not included in here? So does this include spending on extracurricular activities, or just everything else in the budget except for capital expenditures?
Yeah, so I don't want to get too accounting and geeky on you here, but, so there's 1 through 5,000, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. The 5,000s are the ones that are excluded in this analysis, okay? That's debt service, transfers out of any kind, which is a transfer to debt service, transfer to capital reserve, transfer to cafeteria, anywhere. Anything that is non-operating in nature is excluded, okay? So everything else then remains. So that does include athletics, that does include transportation, all those operating items. It does not include the cafeteria, that's a separate fund, right? But it does include all of that, everything besides capital and debt service and not, those types of transactions. But
Thank you.
I think you brought up another great point with percentages. We can compare percentages in a similar fashion. So with the peer group, I'm hesitant to wade into those waters because we can all define our own peer groups, right? So if somebody wants to suggest a peer group to me, I'm happy to spit the report back out. But there was a peer group option here that I removed because I didn't want to skew something in some way and just tell you that's our peer group, because there are a million ways to define what the peer group is. So happy to do that. But another metric we can look at is what spending in those different categories, what percentage of your budget do you spend on that? And you can rank that. There's different things in our software that allow us to take a look at those comparisons. And we've done those comparisons in the past.
And Jim, so that's a good segue. So you were talking about how it's 75% toward labor and benefits. Across, well, forget about the nation, the state, isn't that pretty low? 75%? Isn't it mostly around 80, 85?
No, I think that's pretty.
Is it?
It's about right. We're in the people business, so I mean, I don't think I've seen an 80 before. You still have to buy supplies, you still have purchase services, you still have outplacement, special ed. You still pay for people to go to the CTC. Those aren't salaries and benefits. And if you're looking at the whole budget, certainly the whole budget includes debt service and includes transfers out, and that would bring that 75% that I gave you does include debt service. This analysis excludes it for comparison purposes.
Okay.
So, I think 75 is a pretty good number.
Is it?
I think
Okay.
between 72, 78, there's probably some outliers, but I don't think I've seen anyone in the 80s. Yes.
Is it safe to say that if you did include everything, that would even be wider?
Yes.
Okay. Like much wider?
Yes.
Okay.
We have among the lowest debt loads in the
We
state.
have no debt service, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to point out here, and Rod made this point about the slope of the line there at the end. Now, keep in mind, enrollment statewide was dropping during those years while our enrollment was increasing. So there should have been downward pressure on those upward lines rather than, upward pressure and upward results, I guess you'd see. There's also, other districts did get more stimulus funds at a percentage basis than we did.
Enrollment, are most schools' enrollment going up, or is it trending down?
It's going down. I mean, Jim, I could get this wrong, so correct me. It is going down, and I give examples of Abington Heights going up, the IU going down. I forget the exact percentage. It was in one of my presentations, so I'll have to get that. So we're one of the few. It's a very low percentage in the state where enrollment is going up. However, one of the details that a lot of folks really don't think about when we talk about the basic education formula, you oftentimes hear the word hold harmless. So when we talk about, and you hear from politicians about, driving more money out, okay? Here's where I'm bird walking, Jim. But I think close to 5% of that is only being pushed out on an updated basic education formula. When they say hold harmless, what they're doing is they're going back to a school district's enrollment close to 15 years ago. Am I close to that?
And they're locked in, yeah.
Right, which is a long time ago. So I'll give an example. When I got to Philadelphia, back in those days, we were probably close to 140,000 students. Right now, they have 113. But 95% of the basic education formula is being driven by that higher number, right? So that's the little bit of the nuance that I like to push into with some of our local legislators about, because, look, we're growing, others are falling. Redo that, because districts that grow are going to be the beneficiary. Now, there's plenty of other superintendents that were going to argue that with me, but my job is to not advocate for other school districts. My job is to advocate what's best for us. So enrollment can be a slippery slope. I'm glad we're going up. I just would like to see some adjustments made so we could leverage that. Is that right? Am I?
Yes, yeah,
All
we're
right.
locked in, and now, we did enjoy the hold harmless during that beginning of that enrollment graph,
Right.
because we didn't lose any subsidy there. And nobody will lose subsidy, I think the governor even said.
Yeah.
in it. So you're kind of going, you're flattened out, but I think he's talking about moving the hold harmless up to current and then resetting, which makes it worse for us. So there's a lot of nuance to it, as Chris said. And so if they eliminate hold harmless and we're rising, that's a good thing. If they move it up and locked it in at a higher level, that's a bad thing. That means if we continue to grow anyway.
Increasing enrollment for us is a mixed blessing because it doesn't necessarily mean we're getting more revenue because more taxpayers are coming in. It may mean that we're getting students from private schools coming back to Abington, where their families are already paying taxes, or there is a benefit obviously for charter schools coming back, but it may not be the benefit,
Right.
much of a benefit. So it's definitely a two-way sword.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't want to wade into the subsidy calculation, but you get reimbursed on weighted average daily membership, not average daily membership. Average daily membership is the number of kids you have here. The weighted average penalizes schools like us for being too wealthy, and there's a multiplier, and our multipliers are below 1. So we start with 3,400 in enrollment. I'm going to take a wild guess. I think we end up with about 2,800 in weighted enrollment, right? So we get penalized there, but relative to the state, because we have more kids, our slice of the revenue pie grows. But it just doesn't grow commensurate with if, we'd have to pick up 2.5 students to, somebody that has a multiplier greater than 1. We'd have to pick up 2.5 students to their 1 because they get extra credit for each student they bring in. We get it discounted. So,
And where would we put them?
but we spent a whole board meeting on that last year, but I don't know if I want to wade into that one this time. So here we go. We already talked about the stimulus funds expiring at the end of this year. But here's the good news. Now, we're going to lock in the 2 top bullets there, basic ed in 22, 23, and 23, 24, because they're in hand. They're locked in. But I always say, let's be careful when we talk about this governor's budget proposal, $610,000. We would love to have it. You just have to be very cautious in taking that to the bank. We probably won't know what that number is when we pass our budget in mid-June. I have the date here a little bit later. We didn't know what the budget was in mid-December this year, right? Because the state didn't do it until, was it the new year or was it just before Christmas? But it was 6 months in before the state passed it.
Right. I mean, they didn't effectuate some of those fiscal code changes till December, and they'll say, well, it was only 2 to 3% of the budget. But that meant almost $180,000 to us, which we use on staffing. So that's very, very real. And that's, you know, we passed our budget in the beginning of June, and they didn't effectuate that until right before 24 hit.
So from a revenue approach, we traditionally use a conservative approach, and we don't take to the bank things that we don't know are coming in. And I'm going to show you some revenue results that showed we were probably a little too conservative in the last time around, but that's good news here. But again, when you're guessing blindly and you don't have all the data in front of you, and there's, you know, maybe perhaps some recessionary fears at the time that you're doing things, you make assumptions based on the best data you have. So here are the 22-23 fiscal year results. We broke even last year, but there's a little caveat there. Because of the positive results that I'm going to show you in a second, we were able to transfer in that expenditure line item $1.765 million to capital reserve fund. Okay, that's not actually physically transferred yet. That won't happen until you approve the audit report, and that is where it's accrued, or we have it set up to be approved, so that if you agree with this approach, which we traditionally have done year after year whenever there is any kind of a surplus available, we will move that over. That will be available. That will bring your capital reserve balance to somewhere around $7 million, just south of it. I think we just paid a few bills. So that will provide a little boost going into all the various projects that are being discussed. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. Some of the key budgetary variances now. This is a busy slide. I apologize, but let me just kind of walk through quickly. Real estate taxes, a lot of times our delinquent taxes lag, but we had a good year in collecting delinquent taxes, which boosted this up. 622,000 current and delinquent taxes, more than budget. The big one really was earned income taxes. We had these recessionary fears at the time, didn't know what the economy was going to be doing. Lo and behold, it just kept going up and up and up and up. So you have almost $900,000 positive variance in that category there. And the earnings on investment, we did. This was a deliberate plan, as we know. We put in a bond treasury purchase program where we actively invest every dollar that we can. I wish we can get a few more million in there, but you know, now we're looking at we're getting pretty low on our cash cycle. So we're $576,000 more than budget, which is that's a big help right there. And those rates continue. Actually, they're a little higher this year currently, and people keep speculating they're going to come down, and they've leveled off a little bit, but haven't really come down. And as soon as the cash flow cycles resumes again, we're going to aggressively get back in and try to go long meaning 1 year is the longest investment we can make, and we're going to try to preserve those earnings as far out as we can to make sure that we can rely on this line item going forward for at least another year. Real estate transfer taxes, real estate stayed hot. I don't know if you know, every sign that goes in the yard seems to come right back out a couple days later, and the houses are sold. And the basic ed subsidy came in $466,000 more than budget in that year. That was passed after we passed the budget. Had we known what it was, we would have budgeted exactly that number. However, we went with a 2% increase, which is historically a pretty good increase for us. But this was a historic increase there in that budget year. The expense variances, the special ed category was $746,000 over budget. We saw that on one of the graphs I showed. Cyber charter and tuition, we also saw this on the graph through Dr. Schaefer's efforts and the team. We brought down, we came in $469,000 under budget, right? So that's tracking and going back and having those conversations and bringing them back. So that's a very significant positive variance there. Buildings and grounds, $380,000 over budget. And I think this hints at, Rod, what your question was, like, old buildings require a lot of maintenance, right? So a lot of stuff breaks, we have to fix it. So, that's evidence there. We went over budget. Transportation came in $129,000 under budget. Athletics, $129,000 over budget. We looked at that. That was largely a lot of transportation, some officials, and some supplies. We had to replace a number of things in supplies, and we had some very successful teams be transported to playoff games last year. So the cost of transportation is also high. Yes.
So where in these numbers do we find the settlements for real estate tax appeals, such as Weiss Markets and?
So this is a pure revenue number, all right? This is a pure budget versus actual analysis. So you wouldn't see it here. The Weiss market wasn't settled until after 22-23. Actually, I think so in the current year, if in this particular analysis, you would have seen about, I think their tax bill was like $180,000. You would not see a positive variance of $180,000 there. There are a lot of ways to look at it. I tried to go budget to actual to.
It's working to reduce the real estate tax revenue.
The assessed value went down.
The assessed value went down. As a result, the real estate tax revenue went down for 10 years in the Weiss case.
Now, am I also correct in assuming that Weiss will be the gift that keeps giving for at least a decade, and DJM, however, comes back on the assessment rolls next year. So we had to take them off of our total assessed value, right? We just take that off. DJM goes back on the assessed value, and then we're also seeing a historic number, although this number will not seem historic to you, but it's one of those small numbers that's really a big number. And the assessed value is like 1.06 up.
That includes DJM, yes.
Right.
Hmm?
Which is kind of us getting almost 327,000 back. So,
Yep. So
Weiss hurts a lot. DJM was the second punch, but at least they took a glove off. We'll get that back.
yeah, the difference was the length of the case that was outstanding and the discrepancy between the assessed and market value.
Yeah.
So those are the notable budget variances. Now, what we do with these variances now is we don't just let them go. We go back, we compare that year to year to date, which you'll find in your board report. We'll talk about that in a second. And then that informs what we do going into 24-25. That also informs our forecasts that we use to create those debt models that we talked about at the middle school and high school auditorium. I think it's the high school auditorium. This is like a constant process, right? So that last model was built on 6/30/23 actuals, and then we trued it up to 6/30 or to current, and we made the adjustments, and then we built the model going forward there. Now we have 12/31 actuals that are in your board packet this month, and we'll make it another adjustment, and then we'll affect the model. And now, too many models creates confusion, but we want to keep everything up to date. But the budgeting process is a detailed process. As I said, we will go through every single employee. When a retirement comes up, we'll reset that person, right? So we don't make these broad estimates of what staffing will be. So the 75% of your budget is actual names in a budget and their actual salary. The nice thing is we know what those salaries will be next year, with the exception of a teacher moving columns or a teacher leaving and being replaced, okay? So they kind of work against each other. Columns cost us more, attritional savings usually cost us less. So they kind of, butt up against each other, and there's a push and pull there. So, but that's how the budgeting process works. As far as salaries and benefits, a lot of the other ones are known, but and then we have to make some informed not guesses, but projections on, say, special ed, right? So we have conversations with the NEIU, with the special ed director to say what placements are coming in, do we have any rolling off, and anything like that. And then what are we looking for? You know, like, there are a couple outplacements in particular that are kind of budget busters for us, but obviously necessities. But once I hear one of those names, I know there's going to be another $50,000-$60,000 that's going to have to be added to the budget, and we really don't have any control over those placements in a lot of cases. And here's the timeline. So we passed the ACOID resolution in January. We actually have whether we call it a budget meeting or not, we have continual, finance discussions, right? I think every superintendent report has some form of finance or budget. We expect in March we'll have the auditors here to give you their findings of the year I just kind of spoke about. In there, you'll have what's called the management discussion and analysis. That's my detailed analysis on what happened, budget to actual, and what happened year over year. And you'll have like a plain English explanation of why we missed the budget on certain things like I just did there, and what increased, what decreased, that type of thing. Preliminary budget, both of our May and June board meetings are early this time around, we'll have to approve on May the 15th, the preliminary budget. We'll make any changes that we need to between May the 15th and June 19th, and that would be the day that we would pass the final budget there. Any questions on schedule? And I guess the discussion I was hoping to have was just if there are any questions on interoperability between capital and operating, right? So like anything that we do, especially when you want to go get that debt service number from 800,000 to say 5.4 or 4.7, anything we do on the operating side impacts what we're able to do. So if we said, hey, let's go add 5 teachers and we need to do this right now and let's get 2 more administrators, well, that's $700,000 roughly that you're not going to have available to you every year for debt service. The opposite, if we found a way to reduce recurring expenses by $500,000, well, that's $500,000 that you're going to have for debt service. If we get out over our skis and go a little too far in the debt service, that debt service is going to eat into the operation, and then we're going to have to make some tough decisions to make up that gap. So it's sort of, we have this separate discussion, like we talk about finance, about debt and finance, and then we talk about the budget, but we're forced now to have a discussion, concurrently. So I didn't know if anyone had any questions about how that works or any insight they might want to offer on that. Well, that's all I had for this evening then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next part of our meeting is for public comment. If someone would like to address the board, please let us know. We ask you keep your comments to 3 minutes, and when you approach the board, we ask that you tell us who you are and where you live.
So what I have to bring up is a little bit embarrassing, to be honest, and so forgive me if I'm a little shooken up. I had emailed Mr. Schaffer. I don't know if you received my email. Maybe you went to the junk or I don't know.
No, I spoke with you, right.
And then I emailed you, but I didn't get a reply, so I don't know.
Oh, I didn't.
You didn't get my email? It might have gone to your junk emails or something, because I never emailed you before, so.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm just gonna read the email I sent to Mr. Schaffer. It will make it easier. So I've been the secretary of the wrestling booster club, and so it was in the middle of last year to be part of the booster club, who manage part of the wrestling program and fundraise money for our middle and high school students with our wrestling activities. I have noticed during this time that some very inappropriate behaviors were happening. I thought I'd mention my concern and move on, hoping that there were not going to be any more issues. The first fundraiser organized by the club was called Meet the Coaches, an event sponsored by the Knicks, local bar of Clackamas, where a raffle and dinner tickets were being sold. Well, included in the dinner ticket was also unlimited beer and wine served. I spare you the details of the debauchery that took place in the name of the Abington High School Wrestling Booster Club. A lady had drunk so much she almost crushed into me going down the stairs. Coaches and school staff were present and drinking as well. I didn't keep track of who had too much to drink, but lots of people there were very much intoxicated. In the state of Pennsylvania, and maybe even federally, it is illegal to keep serving alcohol to intoxicated patrons. When I mentioned it to the club at the next meeting and that the unlimited beer and wine wasn't necessary, the answer I was given was whatever it takes, meaning whatever means necessary are taken to raise money. The Knicks is where it was decided to meet every month. One of the meetings we had took place downstairs as the room reserved for us upstairs was not available. It was difficult for me to take notes of what was being said as there was a lot of noise. I mentioned that maybe we could meet elsewhere, especially when the room upstairs is not available. I mentioned we could meet at the library. Greg Kotchik, vice president of the club, stated that he only wanted to meet where he can drink. A couple weeks before I sent the email to Mr. Schaffer, the Knicks has informed the president that they wouldn't be able to accommodate us anymore because we were not spending enough money on food and drinks during our meetings. I thought that was very inappropriate for a restaurant to say to their customers or anyone using their facilities. I proposed to meet at Denny's, where my husband is a manager, and they would be able to eat as our meeting always fell during dinner time. The first question I was asked was, they don't serve beer or anything there, right? When I got home and informed my husband of the decision made by the Knicks, he felt it was in his right to post a negative remark about it on their Google business ad. A few days later, I received a very unprofessional phone call from one of the members of the club that this comment was unprofessional and that the business has been a big support of the club and that it needed to be taken down, and also accompanied by an apology from my husband or from me on his behalf. I informed her that the comment was taken down, but no apology was going to be made as our feelings towards the business decision haven't changed. I was then informed that the bylaws were broken and that an emergency meeting was going to take place. Again, it had to be at Tully's, where it's very noisy and alcohol's flows. This put me in a very uncomfortable situation, and I decided to design my position and not attend. The comment in question only said, "Very greedy owner, I will not be going back." I didn't write this, my husband did, and I know it is not in any violations of the bylaw. This booster club supports a group of young kids that look up to their coaches for guidance. The fact that we wanted a bar being our main sponsor is completely inappropriate, and the behaviors that took place do not show the right influence for these kids to follow. Even if no children were attending these events, they still saw their parents coming home drunk, and the name of the event was Meet the Coaches. My son is really starting to enjoy wrestling as he's just started last year, but if some changes regarding debauchery and alcohol don't improve, I'm afraid that I do not want him to be around these types of people and be influenced by them.
Yep.
So
Okay.
this is what I wanted to bring up.
Thank you. Fintine, even though this is I just want to make sure, because I don't want to get in a discussion, not because I don't. I did speak with you, because it is a public comment, but I will let you know that I did speak with you. I just checked. I had your email, and you said, take this into consideration. So my apologies for not following up. I didn't take it as you wanted to follow up. But what I did do is I sent that to our athletic director, and then we're going to be discussing it in a committee meeting. We have an extracurricular, so thank you. There was action. I just didn't call you. Thanks. No worries, but I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments? Helene?
I have handouts. Very crude handouts. Good day, I'm Colleen McNaughton. I'm from Clark Summit. And I'm here to discuss, if you wait, you can start talking, I can start the timer yet. I'm here to discuss the parking situation at the high school, and this has nothing to do with, our principal or vice principal at the high school. It has to do with logistics. Thank you. So, my concern, I'm sure you're all aware of what's going on. It's extremely crowded, unsafe for the students, new drivers, going to school every morning. I drive my one son, and what I have is my first crude drawing is the current parking situation, where you have 2 lanes going in, and so therefore those who have to park in the lane furthest from the school or closest to the grass, they have to do like a 3-point turn to try to back in, or somehow, and there's just not room. There's just no room. And you have parents dropping off, you have, it's unbelievable. I would encourage you to go there around 8 o'clock to see what it's like. So, my proposal, since we're talking about budget, and the fact that the enrollment has increased, the parking lot is probably not appropriately sized for the number of students that are in the building. So my proposal would be 2 lanes in, 1 out, and I also want to, I think it's much better to have parking. Every district we visit, when I go with my son for sports, all the parking is not at an angle. All the parking lots, all the different school districts, they're just, a grid. So I know probably if extending the parking into the grass might cause some drainage problems. So then that's why on page 3, I'm suggesting, and these are I literally threw this together, you can put in, I'm not sure of the official word terminology, but it's rocks with, to help the drainage, because I know what adding the turf kind of changed the drainage, and maybe surrounding neighborhoods were upset about that. So it would also add some greenery, and that is that. So, what do you think?
So I can answer your question.
And it's budget time.
Yeah, we'll blow the budget. We'll get it. This is a known issue, and as we had mentioned, we are working with our architects and board to make some decisions about projects, of which the high school, part of the high school, is one of them. We also have some challenges with storage. We've also talked about getting some appraisals on properties, specifically this property here. There is very few people here relative to the space, and when we are trying to find capital, then we need to be honest and take a look at where we have, excess space And can we be good stewards of the community and aid in development while also raising some revenue to help offset some of these facilities? So with that said, one of the things that our architect is taking a look at will be just this. So if we disrupt even 1 acre of land, then I have to go through the DEP. So I went down to the land conservation districts, which fortunately is only a half mile from our office. So this is something we'll be discussing. Right now, we do have money budgeted to, I do think those lines are janky. So we're gonna fix that. But that's worst case scenario. The lines. We have been discussing, Jim and I, places where we can help our maintenance, and there is some land which you've kind of pointed to here, and we're probably going to have to go through some permitting. So this is something that we're looking at, and what it would mean is most likely April, May, because the board has a soft target of late March, early April to make some decisions about at least a project or so. And that then triggers work with our architect and then the land conservation district, if there's anything that we can do in the short term. And one of the things that we look at as far as traffic flow specifically, I don't, this is no big secret, and I think anybody that drives up there, I don't like the other side either of the high school lot, because I have too many violators going down on where the field house is, where the pool is.
Yes,
Even
there
though
are.
it says one way where there's a little gate, people try to sneak right in there. And, as Mickey knows, come springtime, we've got what seems to be 400 kids running around down there. So we do take this seriously. I even called about building another road. Instead of learning about sewage, I learned about power lines, DEP. So we are taking a look at all different ways that we can do it. And, based on this, you're going to have to be a little crafty. I don't want to have to go back to Leanne and say limit parking spots, but we do have to be safe. So there are going to be some changes. We just, we'll try to figure it out.
Good, thank you. With the federal government and the money for rebuilding structure, could any of that money somehow be creatively
That would
provided?
be a really I've tried to get creative on some things that were less creative than that and got the kibosh. But what the board did do is took out a loan for capital improvements. And there is earmark there as well. Plus, as Jim alluded to, we have recently transferred into capital reserve. And at the end of the year, the board always talks about, are there any types of summer projects that we could do that won't interfere with any long-term projects? So this is that type of thing. You can fix a parking lot without having to interfere with, say, a future addition.
Okay. All right, well, I just wanted
Yeah.
to point it out because I do know there have been some accidents, and it's also not a great way for the students to start every morning.
No, and not to complicate matters, but just so you know, I get like 3 phone calls a year every time there's some flooding down Noble Road. I mean, there is a,
That's why I added the third page.
Right. So we have to get the irrigation right. Not that it's our fault, because I got plenty of engineering schematics that say otherwise, so.
Yeah, well, okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to the treasurer's report, and Mr. Mirabelli, we're going to ask you to come up and do another cameo appearance for us.
Me again? Oh, my goodness. Let me move through this. So, since we didn't have
Pressure's
a
on.
meeting in December, we have November's and December's treasurer's report. November started with revenue, the cash balance of $30,623,000. We took in revenues of $4,109,000. Disbursements were $4,183,000 for a cash balance available of $30,548,000. That same balance transfers over to the beginning balance of December. We took in monthly revenues of $4,135,000. We had disbursements of $4,589,000 for a cash balance available at 12/31/23 of $30,093,000. And I'll just put in a plug that the year-to-date budget report is there for your analysis, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Question, Mrs. Tierney.
That's actually what I wanted to bring up for our new board directors. This budget analysis that comes on, that Jim puts together for us is a great opportunity to look at,
how last year's budget was, what was received, and then the actual, and then what the current year is, and what we've received to date. And what is it, quarterly that you send that out with our bills?
No, it'd be monthly now.
Oh, is it monthly?
Once we close the prior fiscal year, it comes out monthly.
Okay.
And it's not Jim, it's Jim's team that puts this together.
It's Jim's team. Okay, and it's just, it really is very helpful to look at, and, you know, it has your revenue and then your expenses. So, but thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Mrs. Tierney. Any other comments? In that case, I call for a motion to approve the treasurer's report as so well
So moved.
discussed.
Second.
Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Okay, Dr. Schaefer, I turn it back over to you.
All
for the
right.
personnel report.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board entertain a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr.
8-0.
Acker, I'd ask the board consider a request to approve the 23-24 spring EDRs.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the January 2024 volunteer list.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson,
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mr. Moran,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask that the board consider a motion to approve the master library proposal, a facilities management software system. So just to clarify before I get any questions, because I do think it's a wonky name. If I owned this company, I would not, I'd name it something a little different, but that's neither here nor there. So I've talked before about enterprise systems, which I probably should not have said, because again, that's not a common term, but basically, we're looking, or we were looking for a software package to not only track, but control some complex business operations. So what do I mean by that? This master library, which is gonna cost us approximately $10,200 a year, allows us to do several things. So the one thing is asset management, right? So imagine all the things we own, right? Laptops, okay? Everything in technology. So we tag those in a specific way. We know where those go. Now think about maintenance. Light bulbs, toilet paper, paper towels, parts to all our boilers, all these things that we can manage that way. The other is a facilities management piece. So we have a lot of different sports, a lot of different activities, and a lot of different public groups that want to use our property. But we don't have a really efficient way to schedule that, to bill, monitor the billing. This allows us to also do that. It also allows us to pay a little bit more for mapping technology. So for instance, right now, Justin Crakey, our tech director, we have schematics of every building where we've got all of our lines. And that's really important because we want to put that in there so when our maintenance folks go in, they can see where all our tech lines are, where we have things hidden for a reason. It just allows things to work more seamlessly. This also, the software package allows us to do a little workflow management. This is not going to happen immediately. It's going to take some time. So imagine a world, hopefully a year down the road after our folks get used to using the system where you take work orders on the go. So our maintenance and custodial staff taking that will know what parts of all of our buildings are getting the most attention and time and cost. We'll know how long it takes to fix a boiler, to mow the lawn up at the middle school, to fix a door. Like, right now, we don't have that. We don't have any workflow management system. And this is going to allow us to be much more efficient, for us to make decisions about future buildings. Like, we can talk all we want anecdotally about, say, cleanliness of buildings, but we really don't have data other than anecdotal data coming in to help us figure out, like, what's the right number, what's the sweet spot at each building, right? So these are all important things that business functions that we will be able to appropriately manage, right? I oftentimes say, like, look, we're just trying to catch up to the year 2000. I mean, if I say, like, it's somewhat embarrassing when I'm talking about asset management, because this isn't a new thing. But this will allow us to really catch up.
So this is an annual fee of $12,400?
Yep, just like the website.
So
and
will
all the-
they come and do all of our inventory and feed into this system all of our assets?
I wish there was an all-in deal like that. So, great question, but what there will be, we've been meeting with them, working with them, and there's an implementation phase. So they will come to us, work with us, and I've said over and over, and I told everybody, because this decision was made with a lot of people in the room. So Justin from technology was there, Tom was there from buildings and grounds, Michelle was there from the central office, and Enrico was there for athletics, because we're trying to figure out all that schedule. So we looked at like 3 to 4 different platforms. This actually was the most cost effective, and it was the one that was highest rated, and we hid the price until the end. So we didn't want to take a look at that. We just spoke with the vendors, talked about these needs, and this was a system that allowed all of us kind of to work together. Now, the implementation phase, as many know in this room, inputs equal outputs. So we are going to be very slow and deliberate. You know, we'll probably start off with tech, because we know we got a lot of solid, Phil knows of the tech committee, we've got a lot of solid information there. They've done a good job. So there's some data integrity there. And some of the other parts, as we work with Tom and custodial services and maintenance, we just want to make sure we get it right and we're starting off the right way. And then we'll just progress.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
Then just one other comment about that, because of the timeline, I think that they were looking to do maybe a soft launch in the summer and then potentially a more full implementation for the fall.
Yep.
And I think the other thing that, I mean, you did cover almost all of it. The one other advantage is tied into the help desk and the ticketing system, so that's pretty big. So a price like this for what we're getting and what we're saving, by just tracking the assets, forget about the preventative maintenance parts and all that, this is a steal.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, now, on the motion, are there any other comments or questions? Keep going? We're good? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hildebrand?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a request to approve the Infinite Campus Agreement for online registration. Before there's any questions on that one, Maggie will say a couple words.
So our student information system has the opportunity for families to register their students and upload all of their documents. And we thought that this would be a good opportunity for our students, for our families, not to be tied to kind of our operating hours, but to be able to enroll their students, and then we would check that information once they enrolled it on their own timeline. So this platform, one, ensures consistency with the documents, because you can only enroll if you upload all of the appropriate documents, and consistency with how students are kind of coded in our system, and allows parents some level of flexibility, because right now they have to be here between our working hours. And if Mr. White, who does central registration, if he's out to lunch, we try to help, but we necessarily don't have all the information. So we're just trying to be super responsive to our families. Our plan, Justin and Mr. White are really, really pushing this to make this go live in the end of March, and we would start this with kindergarten registration on April 1st.
I'm looking at the schedule here, payment schedule. Now, this is an amendment to the program that we already have, right? So this is an addition. It says initial term total is $4,300, but now the annual reoccurring is $7,500.
Right.
So that's an annual. That's going to be an annual.
Right,
okay.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, this system by
But this
far,
is-
I don't, as an educator, it has the most valuable data
Sure.
in it. And it has a lot of add-ons that we just haven't been ready to get. But slowly, we're getting there, and we're adding these things on, like online registration.
I think it's great that you've got a great product and you're adding on the services that they offer us.
Really is.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion, are there any questions?
Just one other comment on this. So, Mrs. Tierney, you bring up a good point. So, in a lot of the technology things that we've done, 2-3 years ago, we were just putting in, like, laying the foundation and the base, and that's what Infinite Campus is. There's a lot of other things that we can do, but this is a great kind of a customer service type thing that we're in a position now, after a couple of years, where we could start doing these things, and this is one of the first ones. That's what's really, because this has been a complaint for a while, so it'd be nice.
Thank you.
Other questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdullah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hildebrand?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr.
8-0.
Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the agreement between Abington Heights and Interpretech for sign language interpreting.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion, any questions?
Who will be able to use this?
So this would be used for communicating with any student, for parent-teacher conferences or parents. So if any of our parents, if their primary language is American Sign Language, then we would bring this interpreter in for parent-teacher conferences, meetings, things of that nature, and also for students who have their primary language as ASL.
Oh, this is a person that's coming in. I thought this was a service. Okay. In my mind, I'm thinking that we're offering this to our students to learn also. Okay.
Yeah, we're not saying we're using it right now. We need a Yeah, this is like some other services that we've put up, like, we're not saying that we need to use it now, so this is like more of like prophylactic, where we're saying, okay,
I
in the
got it.
event we need to, we've already got this contract, we're coming.
But the contract does say it's on-site and video. So because it's American Sign Language, you can't just be on a phone call with it.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Plus, we do esports with the Scranton State School for the Deaf now, correct?
Yes, correct.
Just had a big win today.
A gigantic.
Big win today.
Owen McBenney talked about it.
Yes, he did.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, I ask that the board consider our request to approve the agreements between Abington Heights and the Scranton School District for students 35A and 36A.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion, questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the second reading of the Abington Heights School Wellness Policy 246. This is a procedural mandate from federal government.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board consider a motion to approve the NEIU general operating budget for 24-25 school year. This was also already passed by the joint operating board, which we were a part of.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion. Dr. Schaefer, if I read that right, our contribution in their budget is the same as last year?
Correct. No change.
No change. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board consider a motion to approve the transportation contract between Abington Heights School District and Katie Mears, a private contractor, to begin February 1st, 2024, to transport students to Triborough Christian Academy.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mr. Moran.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, I'd ask the board consider a motion to approve the Abington Heights High School curriculum course guide for the 24-25 school year, which, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Henderson, was a topic of conversation during the curriculum committee meeting today.
Yes. It was.
That's an affirming nod?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right, just making sure.
Are you
That's
making the
a-
motion?
Yes. So moved.
Okay. You made the
Wait.
motion. Can I have a
Second.
On the question.
Now I would like to speak. I would like to applaud Mrs. Tierney, as well as her team administrators, department chairs, and the teachers, Dr. Vitale, who collaborated to make this happen. I had said before, you know, when you look at our course selection guide, I believe it's unmatched. It's amazing how many opportunities and choices that our students have that's preparing them for
postgraduate years. So I applaud the changes that I will report on at the next meeting when we give our update. But just that they're always thinking, they're always taking an input from teachers, students, parents, and collaborating. So this definitely attests to what a collaborative, outstanding process. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Tierney, you had a question?
Yeah, I piggyback on what Mrs. Henderson is saying. I'm looking at the change sheet. I do have some questions. Do I need to wait for the next meeting, or can I ask?
I would ask the questions now. 'cause
No.
you're gonna-
I mean, the questions are, I think this is excellent, doing these added educational intern work experiences. Could someone explain how that's going to happen in the school day? I think these are excellent opportunities for the student.
So currently, we have had work experience at the high school for several years. So these would operate under the same fashion as those students, as long as they met the graduation requirements up to that point, would be able to have an abbreviated day. They would leave, most of them leave at fifth period, and they would participate in one of the 3 opportunities that we outlined in the curriculum guide. So if it was the elementary education one, they would go to one of the elementary buildings and work alongside our elementary teachers and get that experience. It wouldn't be teacher's assistant type work. It would be more like the carpet time, the routines, those things, working with children, developing small group kind of like interactions, working with Justin Crakey and his department in technology and any of those technology needs. And then working with Enrico and his department on, any of the athletic intern needs. One of the courses that we added was the media production course. So that will tie nicely with the athletic intern course, because producing all of for the scoreboards, and the kids have done a really remarkable job, and the need is there, and for an event space, it's an exciting environment when they're outfitted with the music and the video, and they're showcasing the fans and all of that. So it's a collaborative effort between the English department and their elective courses, and then the athletic department to meet the needs. Yeah, you're welcome.
Sounds like it's a win-win situation for
It's
everybody.
a big win for Abington Heights High School. It is.
Well, thank you very much for working on this. This is beautiful.
Thank you.
I'd like to echo what Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Tierney said. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great job. Dr. Vitale.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hildebrand?
Yes.
Mr. Moran?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
8-0.
Okay. Next is informational. We have a list of uses of the facilities, pretty extensive in that it goes on for 2.5 pages. Are there any questions about use of the facilities?
It's good that we just got this new software to help us organize all of this.
Is there any unfinished business?
Just, Mr. Acker, just a reminder, next week, we have our technology committee meeting. It's February 14th at 6:30. We're going to get a lot of updates on some of the projects that we've been doing, and we're also going to look at some potential AI tools that we might be looking at in the future. Also talking about interactive whiteboards. We're kind of recycling those. We're going through the recycling period. And also email security, which on the surface sounds pretty boring, but email phishing has gotten really good. I just got caught with one about a month ago. And so it is really good. So this is another good topic. So if you're interested, you're welcome to attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
On Valentine's Day, correct?
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, that's right. Happy
Because
Valentine's Day.
we love technology.
Is there any new business besides announcing Valentine's Day?
Well, the technology meeting on
Is
Valentine's
on Valentine's
Day.
Day, that's why.
So-
Man,
So you're going to
better have some treats
You're
there,
going to
Miss-
bring the cupcakes?
no, it's not my meeting. Mr. Robeson will.
Is there any other new business? I'd ask for a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, just a reminder, there's a short executive session. I presume it'll be downstairs.
Downstairs in the conference room. Yep.
Thank you all.
How's Ben doing at the Super Bowl?
in? Right. Oh, here, let me throw that one away. Somebody left that here.